I'm really excited about this one. Today we're talking about the 4 best battleships ever made. They are known as the Iowa-class battleships. The Iowa class is comprised of the USS Iowa, the USS New Jersey, the famously short-tempered USS Wisconsin, and the USS Missouri, also known as Mighty Mo, where the Japanese Empire surrendered to the United States of America, ending World War II. Weighing in at 45,000 tons, with 212,000 horsepower. Yeah, we're measuring in farm animals again. Yes, I know the metric system uses horsepower, but I'm okay with it. Because do you see the 3 big turrets on the battleship? Those are known as the Mark 7. Those 9 barrels have a maximum range of 24 miles. Not meters, not commie miles, fucking miles. And the best part, they shoot 16-inch shells. Those rounds are over 2,000 pounds apiece. Those are not Freedom Seeds. Those are fully mature red, white, and blue woods. I'm trying to tell you that when America starts lobbing the Freedom fraction-sized bullets at you, you're probably gonna have a bad time. That's not even all of its firepower. It's also got 10 Mark 12s that shoot 5-inch shells. It's like a Freedom by the Foot extravaganza. And then it's got 140 anti-aircraft guns and 52 autocannons. It's also got the best radar system of any battleship ever, meaning it's more accurate with all that firepower. So when you combine all that firepower with the accuracy, and the fact that it's one of the fastest battleships ever made, capable of traveling 33 knots, which is almost 39 miles an hour if you don't speak seaman, you have the best battleship ever. Cue the comment section. Actually, the Japanese Yamana had bigger guns and was way bigger. It was better. Yeah, it was bigger. It was also way slower. Way less accurate. So if it was daytime and the sea was calm, maybe it could take out an Iowa-class battleship. It's a good thing we have fucking 4 of them. Now, the Iowa-class battleships were so scary, the enemies intentionally avoided them, meaning that they never really got to see a whole lot of action. I mean, the USS Wisconsin only got hit once, ever, and it was fucking pissed about it. During the Korean War, the USS Wisconsin and the USS Buck were going along the North Korean coastline. Their mission was to, quote, destroy railways, tracks, and surrounding mountains. While conducting that mission, a single North Korean artillery emplacement fired upon them, striking one time with a 152mm round, creating a 30 by 20 inch hole in the wooden deck, causing almost no damage. At which point the USS Wisconsin turned all of its guns at the artillery emplacement and fired a full broadside attack. That is so much force that it would push the 45,000 ton ship 4 feet directly sideways from the recoil. Not only did they die on that hill, the hill died too. When the smoke cleared, the USS Buck sent a single radio transmission to the USS Wisconsin that said, quote, temper, temper. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoy my content and maybe like to buy me a beer about it, there's a link for that right here in my bio. If you're not watching this on TikTok, that link should be in the video description. That is also the link for all my shirts and stickers. Until next time, thank you for your service. Quack bang out.
At Take 5, you stay in your car, because we're faster than you think.
Oil change is done.
Hi, I'm JT and I made Result Hunter, the search engine for conservatives. Let me just tell you what it does. First of all, big tech right now is run by a bunch of elitist people who all happen to vote the same way and who all happen to live in huge cities on the West Coast. And so Result Hunter takes those elitist values and elitist sources and kind of pushes them down a little bit in the search engine. Meanwhile, it takes those sources of truth that we believe have been deranked a little bit by Google and it pushes those up a bit. And the main thing that you'll gain from using the search engine is that your ad revenue that you generate by going all over the web will be much more likely to support conservatives and things that support conservative values rather than things that support elitist and liberal cultural values. So thank you. Please use resulthunter.com.
Today we're talking about the Mark 19. I'm just gonna come out and say it, it's a machine gun that shoots grenades. Like, imagine a bunch of grunts pouring a case of hand grenades into a pitching machine. Yeah, it's that. This thing is capable of shooting 40 to 60 grenades per minute up to a mile away. And that's actually just when you want to use it for direct fire like a gun. If you get bored and decide you want to take some half-court shots, you can aim it up in the air and basically use it like miniature artillery. You know, for when you want to hit the bad guy with that yeetus deletus. I'm trying to tell you, it's basically a fully automatic mortar. You know, in case the enemy's hiding behind a tank or something. Because a tank tank is literally what you're gonna need if you plan on being safe at all, because this thing shoots M340 dual-purpose grenades, and they are capable of penetrating up to 3 inches of armor. Should you find yourself not in a tank, the kill radius on one of these grenades is 5 meters in diameter, which is like 16.5 feet. That's like the you're definitely dead radius. If you're within like 50 feet of this thing when it goes off, you're probably gonna have a bad day. If you're inside the 16-foot kill radius, then, well, your subscription to life just got canceled. Your new pronouns are here and over there. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down.
Doom Resurrection was another will be such that it won't just inspire a few imitators. It's only natural to imitate success. Throughout video game history, there are countless examples of clones, shameless mimics that ride aboard the coattails of others. Call it inspiration, an homage, or just a plain rip-off. No good idea goes without a few retreads. On rare occasion, a game's influence will be such that it won't just inspire a few imitations, but forge an entirely new genre. Doom is a massively important step in the development of 3D action games. One that defined the first-person shooter and changed gaming forever. So, what inspired such a revolutionary game? What did Doom do that Wolfenstein didn't? And how much of its influence remains in games today?
No matter how busy you ever got, you always found time for me. And I can't believe I'm never gonna speak to you again.
The early 1990s. A time untinged by guilt. When action movies were unironic, thrash metal was at its peak. And unlike the vice-ridden 1980s, all you needed for a good time was pizza and video games. id Software were living the dream. Their previous success brought access to all kinds of hedonistic thrill. But their core passion remained, and their creative freedom was unfettered. Only one obstacle remained. How do you beat a game like Wolfenstein 3D? While most of the id team were working on delivering Spear of Destiny, the first strokes of their next project were being made by John Carmack. He was discontent with Wolfenstein's engine limitations, and with the increasing pace of the PC gaming market, he could afford to target more impressive hardware. Instead of running on a 286 with less than 1 megabyte of RAM, id's new game would demand at least a 386 with 4 megabytes, and only a top-of-the-line 486 would suffice for the most impressive performance. Some of Carmack's improvements to the Wolfenstein engine ended up in a game called Shadowcaster, developed by Raven Software, a first-person RPG with similar ambitions to Ultima Underworld. It exists as an evolutionary step between Wolfenstein and Doom, the upgraded tech providing a hint at what was to come later in the year from id. Walls and ceilings were now texture mapped, a corner cut less necessary on newer machines, and a chance to inject more variety both underfoot and overhead, including outdoor areas. Diminished lighting allowed texture colors to be gradually faded into the darkness, allowing for better distance cues and variable lighting. Compared to the static, flat light of Wolfenstein, it made a substantial difference to the game's atmosphere. Another major upgrade was to the level architecture. Grid-based no more, walls could be constructed at any angle, at any position. Better yet, floors and ceilings could now be different heights, allowing for platforms, stairs, windows, and elevators. A massive leap forward in terms of level design. Its new, upgraded engine unlocked huge technical potential. All they needed now was a good idea. Clearly, they were onto something good with the 3D shooter formula, so a further exploration seemed logical. Creative director Tom Hall wanted to revisit Commander Keen, a shift away from realistic violence to a cartoon aesthetic, and a chance to tell a more in-depth story. However, the others were less convinced. It wasn't a compelling narrative that made Wolfenstein 3D a hit, it was its fast-paced and instant action. As John Carmack put it, story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important. It was the era of the self-assured action hero, with a hefty arsenal of bombastic one-liners. Yippee-ki-yay, hasta la vista. This is my boomstick. There would be considerable influence from cinema, not through cutscenes or lens flares, but instead as inspiration for the setting, mood, and attitude. Even the name stems from a quote taken from a Tom Cruise film. In The Color of Money, his pool-hustling character is asked what resides within his cue case. With a cocky smile, and pause for effect, he retorts, "In here." Doom. Doom's cybernetic heart beats with the rhythm of science fiction. Future soldiers, high-tech weaponry, and isolated installations on a far-flung world. The Alien films are a key influence, to the point where Doom was originally planned as a licensed tie-in, although this idea was ditched in order to retain more creative freedom. Still, there's no shortage of parallel elements. The grizzled space marines sent in to investigate an anomaly of unknown origin. The interstellar conglomerates operating at the frontier of human exploration. And questionable ethics that unleash dark, dangerous secrets. The Alien films and Doom also share a common visual inspiration: the disturbing surreality of H.R. Giger. His Necronomicon defined the terrifying look of alien xenomorph, and inspired countless nightmares.
Professor is an amazing app that gives you a ton of extra useful information, and you don't even have to tap out to use it. Professor will automatically import the best runes for you and even show you some pro builds too. Before games even begin, you can use Professor to scout the other team, and it'll tell you some key details like who's sucking and who's not, and also who's playing Teemo and has no soul. Oops. There's also an in-game Professor overlay which shows you live stats and allows you to see what areas you need to improve on. What's really cool is there's also a new feature that allows you to track the enemy summoner spell timers, which is honestly a game changer. The best part is Professor is 100% free, so make sure to use my link in the description to get it today.
Wow.
Hey.
Giger's only official contribution to video games was a graphical adventure called Dark Seed and its sequel, but his work's overall influence is far broader. Fearful symmetry amidst an uncomfortable place, somewhere between sex and death, demons and machines. It's this blend that provides the key aesthetic for Doom, a fusion of metallic sci-fi with fleshy hellspawn. The satanic influences originate from id's Dungeons & Dragons sessions, where, at the climax of a lengthy campaign, the entire planet was overrun with demons. No longer constrained by the grid-based stone walls of Wolfenstein, its imagination could run riot, an indulgence of pure, twisted fantasy. A departure from a loose historical basis, from Heil Hitler to Hail Satan. Id have never been particularly afraid of controversial subjects. Still, the devil has all the best tunes, and a game like Doom needed a killer soundtrack. It didn't have to look too far for inspiration. The tunes playing on their office stereo would provide ample material. Tracks evocative of Metallica, Slayer, Pantera, Judas Priest. True, they were lo-fi MIDI renditions, but from the first level to the last, Doom is chock full of thrash riffs. Gory B-movie horror would provide inspiration too, with films like Evil Dead 2 a particular favourite. Its influence is clear in a number of places, such as human enemies possessed by demons, in a similar manner to the Deadites from Evil Dead. The chainsaw and later addition of a double-barreled shotgun are taken straight from the film, and the gory, blood-soaked action that ensues is only natural. Caffeine-fueled, pizza-fed, and a love letter to the culture they consumed. All the elements were starting to come together. A fusion of hell, sci-fi, and fantasy. Alien demons with a twist of Satan. As the end of 1993 approached, so too did Doom's release. Anticipation was sky high, with anxious fans following development through newsgroups and BBS. Confident, it declared that their next game would be Wolfenstein times a million. The hype was real, but could they deliver? Doom's myriad influences ought to make for a crowded mess of ideas, but in the absence of explanation, it works. Here's a shotgun. No more questions. Just get out there and shoot some demons on Mars. Like with Wolfenstein, very little time is wasted. Action is instant, and you're flung into combat straight from the first beat. The level choreography is very similar too. You spawn, weapon in hand, fight through room after room of enemies, and make your way to the exit. Again, levels are episodically grouped, each culminating in a boss fight. The original release comprised 3 such episodes. Knee Deep in the Dead was the first, an introduction to the Mars base on Phobos, and the incursion of Hellspawn into its metallic sci-fi interiors. The second takes you to Deimos, the shores of hell. A descent into diabolical madness, and a border between the human and demon domains. The third was Inferno, a full realization of satanic terror, and a test of the hero's mettle against hell's full fury. This approach was a tried and tested formula. Many elements were retained from Wolfenstein, but Doom was anything but more of the same. For instance, the arcade influences were chamfered to be far less frustrating. Gone were the limited lives. Death was now but a pause, with tougher levels repeatable until cracked. Also absent were the high score tables and the point-scoring pickups. This wasn't Pac-Man. Slaughter is its own reward. Doom also evolved its health economy, with a greater quantity and variety of health pickups. Bonus files litter the levels, with each only providing a single point of stamina, but providing a strong incentive to stay on the move to gradually replenish lost health. Stimpaks provide more immediate relief, and the full-size medpacks and rarer supercharges are a sight for sore eyes when you find yourself in trouble. The addition of armor adds another dimension. with the standard green pickup absorbing a third of all damage until depleted, and the rarer blue suit cutting all incoming damage by half. Fully decked out, taking on the hordes of hell almost seems easy, but a quick comeuppance awaits the overconfident. Health pickups are not necessarily the best solution for every first-person shooter, but one thing is certain: cowering behind cover won't do you any good in Doom.
I don't fight for myself. I fight for my team. But when your moment comes, take it.
A new Planet Fitness location is now open. Join now for just $1.
Here's a question for you. What was the first ever video game? It seems like a simple enough question, but it's trickier than you think. The trouble is, you'll get a different answer depending on who you ask, and none of them seem definitive. So, let's take a critical look at the origin of video games, starting with a brief history of the popular consensus. For a long time, the most common answer to the question was Pong, Atari's 1972 arcade game. Pong was a phenomenon, the first game to break through into popular culture. And for that reason, quite a few magazines from the 80s and early 90s cited as the first ever game, such as Sinclair User in 1986, a 1987 issue of Your Computer, the first issue of ST Amiga Format in 1988, and a 1990 issue of Amiga World. Some do at least add a qualifier, such as Computer Gaming World's claim in 1982 that Pong was the first computer game of renown. Similarly as the first video game for the masses in a 1987 issue of Ahoy. So there was at least some awareness of an earlier history, but not much in the way of in-depth research. I suppose it was a different era. Google wasn't a thing, and even a trip to a local library wouldn't be much use, as video games weren't exactly well documented. So, with Pong being so prominent, it was generally accepted as an origin point. And while it does mark the popular emergence of games, there lies a long and obscure history behind it. The funny thing about Pong is that it isn't even Atari's first game, never mind the first game ever. Before Atari were Atari, they were called Syzygy Engineering, and along with manufacturer Nutting Associates, they released a game called Computer Space in 1971. Computer Space was never as popular as Pong, selling maybe 1,500 units as opposed to the tens of thousands of Pong arcade machines and the millions of subsequent clones. But one of the co-founders of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, was certainly no stranger to publicity. And in interviews during the early 1980s, he was quick to point out that Pong wasn't his first game. Some of the gaming press picked up on this, reproducing his words verbatim. Big K in 1985 cites Computer Space as the first marketed video game, which might be correct. And a 1993 Amiga Format special is proud to reveal that Pong isn't the first video game after all, instead granting that accolade to Computer Space. So for a long time, Nolan Bushnell was seen as the father of video games. But here's the thing. Computer Space wasn't exactly original. It was based on an earlier game that Bushnell had played during his time at Stanford University. Again, something he freely admitted. That game was called Space War, and it first emerged in the computing labs of MIT by 1962. Unlike Computer Space, it wasn't an arcade machine. It was never intended for commercial release. It simply wasn't a viable option. It ran on an expensive minicomputer, the PDP-1, which even in a basic configuration sold for $120,000 in the 1960s. So it was a purely academic exercise, but one that was surprisingly popular on campus, at least amongst those with access to the computing lab. The July 1971 issue of Analog Science Fiction Science Fact describes it as the first true space-age game. And they aren't wrong. This was just 2 years after the moon landings. This is one of very few accounts that detail an interactive game before video games had a meaningful impact on popular culture. It's interesting to see how they treat Space War as a unique thing, rather than as part of something else. Space War isn't seen as a video game. Space War is just Space War. Over its life, the game spread from institution to institution and became reasonably well known within the right community. But it wasn't until the early 1980s that the game started to reach wider public attention. In 1981, one of the game's co-creators, Martin Gratz, wrote an article for Creative Computing, a fairly comprehensive 8-page history of its development and operation. However, it was a 1984 book that did the most to bring Space War to wider public attention. Stephen Levy's Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution, detailed some of the exploits of MIT engineers over the last couple of decades, with a whole chapter dedicated to Space War. So as time went on and more people learned about the game, it gained some recognition as the first computer game. Byte magazine described it as such in 1990. This reign would be short-lived, however, as another, earlier game came to light soon after. A game from 1958 called Tennis for Two. Tennis for Two was the creation of a man named William Higginbotham, an American nuclear physicist. While working at the Brookhaven National Laboratory, he created a game designed to show off the lab's instrumentation at their annual exposition. Tennis for Two was shown to the public in 1958, and once again in 1959, before being dismantled and largely forgotten about. Until 1982 at least, a mention of the game appears in an issue of Creative Computing, an article titled, "Who Really Invented the Video Game?" It details the hardware used, an analog computer with a 5-inch oscilloscope display, and goes on to describe the gameplay. It was a tennis game, not dissimilar to Pong, with a ball following a realistic trajectory as each player hits it back and forth. It was quite a convincing simulation, but considering it was using hardware designed to calculate the trajectory of ballistic missiles, that might not be too surprising. Despite Higginbotham's subsequent radio interview with NPR in '83, the revelation of a video game that dated to as early as 1958 passed most people by. Most were still content in thinking that Pong was the origin. In 1993, author Ira Flatow sought to correct this as part of his book. They All Left, a collection of invention stories from throughout history. The final chapter is all about Tennis for Two. Flatow had worked at NPR, so it's likely he's familiar with Tennis for Two through Higginbotham's interview in 1983. Sadly, William Higginbotham died in 1994, but his obituaries detailed his achievements, including his game. And subsequently, Tennis for Two became well known. The new answer to the question of what was the first video game? Perfectly satisfactory. Looks like Pong, dates to 1958. That can't be much earlier, can there? Today, if you look at Wikipedia's article on the early history of video games, you'll see mention of a 1947 invention. The cathode ray tube amusement device. Sounds like a delightfully archaic term for video games. And we can verify its existence in the patent record. Number 2455992. Submitted on the 25th of January 1947 and granted on the 14th of December 1948. Its impact must have been limited. It's only recently come to prominence, roughly as long as the existence of Wikipedia. This re-emergence can be traced to Jed Margolin's 2001 article, The Secret Life of Vector Generators. Margolin was an Atari engineer familiar with the golden era of arcade games, and crucially, is the named inventor on a number of patents relevant to early video game hardware. This 1947 patent first came to light in a lawsuit. Magnavox vs. Bally, circa 1976. The amusement device was cited as prior art in Bally's defense. So someone working on Bally's behalf must have done the necessary legwork to uncover this. After all, there was a strong incentive. Magnavox held a key patent on video games that earned them $100 million over its lifetime. And, according to the man behind that patent, Ralph Baer, video games were his invention. The man had an interesting career. He fled Nazi Germany in 1938, was drafted into World War II in 1943, and, courtesy of the GI Bill, attained the first ever BSc in television engineering in 1949. By 1961, he ended up at Sanders Associates, a defense contractor that specialized in electronic systems. In September 1966, Baer laid out his ideas for an interactive television game, and work began on a series of prototypes. These prototypes culminated in the brown box design in 1968, so named for its wood grain effect vinyl covering. This device connected to any standard television and could play a variety of games, including a tennis game that has a startling similarity to Pong, seen here in a 1969 demonstration. This was the system that would eventually be licensed and sold as the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972, the very first home video game system. Everything at Sanders was remarkably well documented, perhaps because of their work for the military, but this means there's a large body of dated documentation to accompany Baer's invention. Additionally, unlike Tennis for Two at Brookhaven National Laboratory and Space War at MIT, Sanders was a commercial entity. They existed for profit, and were at liberty to patent their innovations. And patent they did, with Baer's work submitted in 1968, amended while pending in 1971, and granted in 1973. US patent number 3728480. A second was filed in 69, granted in 72, and reissued in 75. Reissue 28507. Collectively, the 480 and 507 patents gave Sanders and licensee Magnavox a very strong legal right to fundamental concepts behind early video games. A right which they exploited. Magnavox filed lawsuits against Atari, Bally Midway, Chicago Coin, Mattel, Activision, and won all of them, garnering substantial licensing fees. Nintendo preemptively sued Magnavox for the US launch of the NES in 1985 in an effort to overturn these patents. They lost as well. Patents are strong, and Magnavox had precedence. Despite the legal victories, Baer was regarded as something of an also-ran in the early video game stakes. But he gained quite some recognition following the 2004 award for the National Medal of Technology. His time spent forgotten is evident in the frustrated tone of his 2005 book, Video Games in the Beginning. He lays his claim to the industry's genesis, and the disdain for Nolan Bushnell and Atari's later success is particularly apparent. He's also very dismissive of any precursors. He writes off Space War as impractical, and Tennis for Two as akin to fiddling with an oscilloscope. But it's hard to blame him. He was definitely a pioneer. Ralph Baer died in 2014 at the age of 92. His accomplishments in video games eulogized. Whether or not he invented video games, he can lay legitimate claim to the first home video game.